Taken from the Gospel according to John, this is an account of how Peter might have told us about the events from his own perspective. We were confused. Jesus seemed to be having the goodbye conversation with us. We said to one another, "What does he mean by saying to us, 'A little while and you will no longer see me'? And again, 'A little while and you will see me'? And 'because I am going to the Father'?" Jesus knew we wanted to ask him what he meant. He told us plainly. He said, "Very truly, I tell you, you will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice. You will have pain, but your pain will turn into joy." You will weep, but the world will rejoice. We were all of us wondering, what did he mean? How could this happen? We knew his purpose was for Israel to know him as King, the coming one, the Christ. We'd learnt this from all the things he'd taught and from how he'd showed us that God is love, that God heals, that God delivers us. We knew he was from God. And yes, we'd heard the arguments about where he came from, but never did we consider he would say to us that we would no longer see him. No, this cannot be. There was deep love in his eyes as he spoke to us clearly. He never withdrew his love, even when I said things I later regretted. His love never faded. He continued to explain to us, teaching as he did with an example to help us grasp the meaning of the words. He said, "When a woman is in labour, she is in pain because her hour has come. But when her child is born, she no longer remembers the anguish because of the joy of having brought a human being into the world. So you have pain now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice. No one will take your joy from you." Then he told us that we can ask the Father for anything we want, that we must ask in Jesus' name. We did not know where he was going to, but he said he would explain it clearly, that he was leaving us and going to the Father who loves us. We reassured him that we understood this plain talk. We reassured him that we understood, and now know that he came from God. Then he prayed for us. You have never heard a prayer like this. I tell you, he has such deep concern for us, care for us, love for us, purpose for us. Perhaps none of us really understood this prayer, but, well, it was him. The way he spoke, the authority and wisdom. All of us heard, and perhaps none of us really heard. After all, we were his ones, the disciples. We were the ones he spoke to after all the crowds had left, when he explained and taught us because we were his closest ones. What could we think? Then Jesus took us across the Kidron Valley to our garden place. We gathered there, but it was then that I saw him. Him, Judas. Jesus had told us that one of us would betray him, but here he was. And Jesus had still called him my friend. I felt this was a serious situation. We must do something. Here was Judas with a detachment of soldiers. together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They came with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus stepped forward and asked them who they were looking for. I watched. I could feel the adrenaline flowing as I positioned myself ready to defend Jesus. I wanted to show him that I was willing to die for him. They said they were looking for Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus told them, "I am he." The authority in his voice reassured me. It was amazing. He said the 3 words, "I am he," and they all stepped back and just fell to the ground. I looked at Judas. He was standing with them. With them. He should be with us. Yet, look how Jesus sees him. He never withdrew love. Love for his friend. He asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" And they said again, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these men go." We realized later that these words would be to fulfill the words he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of those who you gave me." This reference to us was enough for me. It was the moment I must act. I took my sword and struck Malchus. I took his right ear clean off. Malchus was the slave of the high priest. I was not going to let Jesus go without us, without a fight. We were in this together. But then Jesus turned to me, giving me his full attention, saying that I must put my sword back into its sheath. Then the words that I remember so clearly, "Am I not to drink the cup that the Father has given me?" I remember this because they reminded me of the meal we had together. This was when he washed our feet. I mean, this was crazy. I was not going to allow him to wash my feet. But it was then that he told me, "Unless I wash your feet, you will have no part in me." So I asked him to wash me thoroughly, my hands and my head as well. I could not endure any thought of not being a part of Jesus. I would follow him to the end. When he was telling us that we could not go where he was going, I asked him plainly, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I would lay my life down for you." And I would. There was nothing I would not do for him. I would always stand by him. Jesus answered, and I remember these words so clearly. He answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times. I didn't answer. I knew my heart. I knew my resolve to never leave him alone. So the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. I could not bear to see this. They bound him. Here was the one who had freed everyone who came to him, freed them from the things that had bound them, freed them from their sickness, delivered them from bondage. Here, he was allowing them to bind him. They took Jesus to Annas, and John and I followed as they did so. Annas was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. He was the person who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. John was known by Caiaphas, so he followed into his courtyard. I waited outside the gate while he went and spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, asking her to allow me in. The woman came to me while escorting me in. She asked, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" I quickly denied that I was a disciple. I wanted to get near to Jesus. I mixed with the slaves and police who had made a fire there in the courtyard. We warmed ourselves by the flames. It was a while before Jesus came out from his hearing before Annas, and so we got talking. They asked me, "You are not also one of the disciples, are you?" They looked at me, and I quickly had to deny this, saying plainly, "I am not." I had hoped this conversation would end there, but there was a relative of Malchus, whose ear I had cut off, who also quizzed me. "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again, I denied this. Then I heard it, in the silence of the moment, after I had said for the third time that I did not know Jesus. The cock crowed. My heart was pierced with anguish at what I had done. Then a noise rose up, and I looked as they brought Jesus out. They were taking him to Caiaphas. He was bound. I could see his face had been struck, and I looked at him. I looked at Jesus. Jesus looked at me. It was as if he looked right into my heart. He was bound and beaten. Just the moment when he needed a friend, we had all left him, scattered by our word and position. I had abandoned the one who I said I would always follow and die for. Yet he looked at me with the deepest love and affection. Abandoned and rejected, he never withdrew his love. I now know that if he had withdrawn his love in any way through any sin, then he would not have been worthy to die for us in our place. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, without sin, looking at me as I looked at him. I went out and wept bitterly.
Yet the scars of my past sacrifice you. So just as I am, blemished and flawed, at the foot of the cross, I am totally yours. At the foot of the cross, I am totally yours. Totally yours, Lord Jesus. Totally yours.
The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us of a centurion who witnessed Jesus' death. This is an account through his eyes. It started out just an ordinary day. I was a centurion in the Roman army, in command of 100 men, and we had been deployed to Jerusalem. It was not a good posting, but of course we had no choice. We had to go. One of the grimmer tasks was to supervise crucifixions. This was a bad way to die, which the empire reserved for the worst criminals, for slaves and enemies of Rome. We had 3 who would die that day. One of the prisoners, Jesus, was already in a bad way because he'd been severely flogged. I remember he was so bad that I had to order a bystander to carry the crossbeam of the cross for him. This was not a job for a proud Roman soldier. When we arrived at what the locals call Golgotha, the place of the skull, I gave the order to nail him and the other 2 to their crosses. Then we all lifted them up to get the crosses into the sockets. Then their agony began. It was not uncommon for us to have to listen to the insults hurled by the crowd as they watched. Some of the men sometimes joined in. He seemed to have said that he was the Son of God. That's what got him crucified. But if that was true, why did God not save him? But he just looked down. And it was like he was looking straight at me when he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." I'll never forget his words. It could take days for someone to die on a cross. Jesus only took a few hours, though, before he said, "It is finished," and died. I got the lads to check before we took him down, just in case. He was dead all right. No need to break his legs like we did the other 2. But we spared his side, just to be on the safe side. No doubt, he was dead. But this was no ordinary death. This was no ordinary man. The sky demonstrated that as it went dark, and the earth itself shook at the moment he died. It was like all of creation seemed to be mourning his death. Me? Well, I was just terrified. What had I done? I'd carried out my orders, but what had I done? What have I been part of? The sign on his head said he's the King of the Jews. Well, as a Roman centurion, I can't agree to that. But surely this man was innocent. Surely he was righteous. And I thank God for sending him. But now it's over. He's dead. He's in his tomb. All hope is gone.
Death crept moments from him, moving restless to his bones, threading tendrils of emptiness to kiss extinction through his flesh. Blood dropped like pinpricks, sweat dripped to the stones of Gethsemane. There in the garden, venom slipped from death's jaws. There death stretched out its claws and heaven was torn. It was death that stood over him, whistling the sting of the whip cracks, its tongue the serpent flicker on his back, its bite the thorns drawing bloodied crown, its heft in the timber he lifted through Calvary's climb. It was death beating in his every step, beating in his chest like last breaths. As death pinned him to Golgotha's peak, the world slipped away beneath. Trees shrunk back to the soil, collapsing to empty seeds. The sun spilled in dark streams down the mountains. Eyes closed to no sleep. Cities slowed their dancing. Firesides filled with eclipse. The stars fell. Love died. Heaven now ash at his feet. And all that was left was death's cold lips, piercing his form, piercing the earth to disorder. The earth threw its arms wide open, and from its bursting heart he arose, breaking the surface of hell's black waters. Storms surge in his eyes, head drenched in sighs of the released. Dew glistened on his skin like broken chains, standing panting on the shattered grave, death hanging slumped in one hand, the other aflame in the dazzle of a risen world. His wounds spilled the blood of dawns, and his every word was a winged messenger, a blast of trumpets tearing up the skies. I have stood face to face with death. I have wrestled it through the cavernous depths. I have rewritten every word it has spoken. I have made it submit. I am the resurrection. I am the breath. Come breathe of me and live.